Hey guys, welcome back to Hook with Anime. If you like the video, make sure to subscribe to my channel. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Naruto. Dorobo no Kitsune. It's been centuries since Naruto had any excitement in her life. After having dealt with the problems in the elemental nations and doing her best to ensure that all ways of world domination were recorded and had fitting plans to battle each of them, she and the most of the Uzumaki pulled back to Uzushio no Kuni and moved the island far out on sea. She had left a small group within each hidden village to act as observers. There had of course been wars and skirmishes within the elemental nations, but nothing that would put the world as they knew it to an end. She let the people have their freedom to do as they wished. She had brought the Uzumaki back to their true glory and made sure that they were still true to their ways. But over the centuries, merely observing was not enough for her or the clan. And as a result, she had introduced the Uzumaki to the ways of the scribe. Instead of merely observing, the Uzumaki would record and investigate, all the while staying out of the way of the world, to not interfere or otherwise influence the elemental nations. And it worked. Uzu no Kuni now held the knowledge of over 1,000 years of existence. Many of the old works from before she rebuilt her homeland had been lost due to time and neglect, and so much of what had transpired before the rebuild were copies of texts from other villages and first, second and third hand accounts, all compiled into one scroll concerning each specific topic. But even with all of that, immortality tends to leave one bored over time. And so once again she was lying down on top of the Azukage Tower's roof debating on things to do. As she was thinking, a presence made itself known. "What can I do for you, Triala-chan?" Naruto asked, bored. The good thing for slaves of a Biju was that slaves were bound to the life force of their master, and for a Biju a lifespan means nothing, so to avoid Biju to enslave a group of creatures every generation, slaves were as immortal as their masters, however they could still be killed. "Forgive my intrusion, Naruto-sama," Triala said submissively. But some of the little ones were hoping to be taken on a fly across the sea to the mainland. They were hoping to be allowed to go camping in Jonguru no Kuni. Their parents have already allowed them to go, however as they are planning to leave our lands, they need your permission. Naruto mulled over the request. While it was normal for the young ones to want to spend as much time as they could outside of the walls, to practice their survival skills, it was very rare that young ones would request to leave Uzu. However, she did also understand that as diverse as Uzu's terrain was thanks to tremendous work and effort while she was rebuilding the island, it could still get boring once you've spent enough time was spent there. "Of course, I'll take them over in an hour. Tell them to pack only the necessities. They can gather food in the jungle. I'll be visiting my parents," Naruto said with a sigh. Triala nodded and left. Naruto got up and jumped down the cliff at the back of the tower. Within seconds she unleashed large-scaled wings from her shoulders and glided down to the tomb of Uzu. She retracted her wings as she hit the ground and looked down at the entrance. The entire tomb itself was underground, only marked by a 2-story statue of the Shinigami with its siblings Yami and Kami. She walked down the steps and entered through the wooden door. The tomb was filled with rows upon rows upon rows of stone shelves. The dimensions of the cavern were constantly enlarged through the use of a few choice seals. Walking through the rows of urns and pictures and mementos, she finally came to a stop in front of a decorated shelf. In it stood 2 urns, both black, decorated with white calligraphy. Within it there were the sign of Konoha for her father's urn and the sign of Uzu overlaid by the sign of Konoha for her mother's urn. Above them were a picture, each of them in their prime, and in between was a picture of her being hugged from both sides by her parents. Under the urns were their Hite-8 and signature weapon, the tri-pronged of her father and her mother's katana Chimamire Kiba. Bowing deeply to the shrine, she silently whispered a short chant. Staying bowed for a few more seconds, she then straightened herself and left with a deep and heavy sigh. Outside she made her way to the main gate and waited for the young children. It didn't take them long to arrive. With a quick signal with her chakra, 4 Hanyu appeared. The kids looked excited. Naruto walked a few feet out of the village and fully transformed into a mountain dragon, her golden red scales reflecting in the sunlight showing of the colors of the sunset. The children in the Hanyu climbed onto her back and she took off. After an hour flying, Naruto landed in the jungle. Her passengers jumped of and leapt into the trees. Use this seal to call Yagura-kun. He'll be your ride back. All you need to do is get to the shore. If anything happens where you need assistance, I use the emergency seal and whoever is closest will come to help. The Hanyu nodded and Naruko took to the skies again. She was taking her time, enjoying the freedom watching the dense vegetation give way to impeccable sandy beaches. Once she was above the water she lazily dragged her talons across the water's surface. Sighing once again, she flapped her wings and stared into the distance. After a couple of hours she had reached the beaches of Uzu. Landing in the soft, white blanket, she transformed back and laid down. Just as she was drifting into sleep, she got called to a hunt. Hunting realm. Walking to the nearest shrine she quickly did a summoning chant and watched the Shinigami materialize from the flash of light. Shinigami-sama, what is it that I can do for you today? She asked respectfully. Huntress, I called you here because I and my siblings have need of you. Step through the portal and we will welcome you in the Hall of Gods. Naruko nodded and stepped through the portal. Hall of the Gods. Naruko braced herself. She was hit by the presence of multiple powerful beings. At the end of the hall were 3 thrones, in the center sat Kami, to her right sat her sister Yami and to her left her brother Shinigami. Steeling herself, she made her way towards them. She stopped in front of them and bowed. So this is the young huntress you are so fond of, Oto-Uto? Kami said with curiosity. She is, Ne-sama. This is Uzumaki Namikaze Naruko no Hanyu, Masumi no Kurama. She has been a huntress for my realm for just over 8 centuries now, Shinigami replied with a respectful tone. Is that so, and what are you doing with all the time your new immortality has granted you, young one? Kami asked. I have my clan working as scribes, recording everything that is happening. However, lately things have come to a boring stalemate, nothing interesting is happening. She answered. Kami seemed to mull this over for a bit. After a few minutes she waved for 3 deities and had her step away. After an hour of waiting, she was beckoned by Yami to return. Naruko, these 3 here are the main deities of their world. It is the same world that Odin, Zeus and Jupiter used to call home. They have agreed to help you with your boredom. Their world is now at a time of peace more or less, however the area you will be sent to, has quite a lot of interesting characters, as well as quite the interesting history, for you to document. As you are a scribe you should find the aspect of studying an entire world with vastly different cultures and thousands of years of documented history to collect and archive. To say Naruko was intrigued was an understatement, however the main thing to discuss was her abilities. Will I be able to keep my abilities? Of course, however I suggest you do not use them as they are something that does not exist in that world. Naruko nodded. She turned to the 3 deities. I thank you for allowing me the opportunity to explore a bit of your realm, she said bowing deeply. Of course. Now we know you are an archivist so we will give you the resources you need, the 3 said in unison. I will need an island, whatever currency they use in identification. All relevant information I can gain through Kage Bushin. It will be done. You have 3 days to gather your group. We suggest to bring along at least a few scores of people, living or dead, it will be beneficial. Naruko bowed deeply and walked back. Realm of the living. Naruko was back in her home. She already knew that many her fellow Biju would have to remain in Uzu, but she would bring the majority of the Hanyu and Uzumaki archivists. Add to them their families and some more young ones and families from the warriors and hunters, and she would have a decent population. All she would need now would be a charismatic leader. Maybe Kurama would also be interested. She ran into the forest after sending out a mass of Kage Bushin. Once she was in the forest she called out for the former queen of demons. What can I do for you, Naruko-chan? Kurama asked, appearing out of the undergrowth behind her. I was offered a chance to experience a new world and was wondering if you were willing to come along. I always enjoy traveling with you, Naruko said with a small amount of hope. Why of course, I'll let Yagura know that he is in charge. Is there anything else I can help you with? Yes. From what I gathered from my talk with the deities of that world I will still be needing a charismatic leader, and they can be from the hunting realm. Then what about your human parents? Nagai-ha and Mara should have their duties down and handle things. Naruko nodded and sent a clone to the hunting realm. She herself prepared herself by going through all of her abilities. Then the day came. Those that were going to accompany her were ready and Cammy herself had come to transport them to their new home. She had opened a portal and they went through. The new world, the island, was exactly as she had hoped, an unassuming village with a castle in the center. Around the village were tall walls and outside of those were fields and vast forests. A river was flowing from the castle courtyard throughout the village and ended in a lake in the forest. Naruto had immediately ordered the reinforcements of the walls and structures with fuinjutsu, while her and her parents would find a way to locate their position on this world. Naruto, came Kami's voice. This is what the three have set up. Your island is a small, but very powerful, independent nation called the Kingdom of the Whirlpool. Like Uzu, this island is protected by strong whirlpools. You and your parents have just returned from a meeting with the leader of the nation you are going to be operating in. It is called the United States of America. You have been allowed to live in a city on the west coast of the nation. The story for you is that in order to increase foreign relations with these United States, you are there as a student in what they call high school. You'll have to appear like a 14-year-old, so you'll have to see how to do that. On top of that, you have enough wealth to rival the richest persons in the city. You will have to see about housing yourself. On top of that, you have 1 week to learn all the basic things you need to know. As of next week you are to be in school. Your parents have secured you everything you need for that. There is a folder in your bedroom detailing what you need. Also, I have given you the knowledge of speaking the most prominent language you will encounter in the city to make things a little easier. I suggest you leave now. Naruto nodded and left. On the beach was a strange contraption. It was enormous, about the size of a young adult mountain dragon. She could see 2 seats at the front, numerous large pipe-shaped protrusions jutting out, giving the thing a bulky look. On top of it were 2 crosses made of 4 blades each. Naruto did not know what to make of it. Just as she was about to leave, a group of 2 men and 3 women came out to the back of the contraption, carrying weird items in front of them. Instantly Naruto was reaching for her ninja too. The outsiders lifted their strange items and pointed them at her. What are you doing on Uzumaki lands? Naruto asked, her body tensed. We were sent here to be escorts for the princess of this kingdom. We mean you no harm, the lead female said. If what you say is true, then their majesties would have given you a cloth with the insignia of their family crest. Show it to me, and we may talk about our princess. Naruto's voice was firm and left no room for debate. The leader nodded and lowered what Naruto presumed to be a weapon. The leader pulled out a cloth and unfolded it. It was the Uzumaki crest. You speak the truth. I will lower my weapons, and I suggest you do the same. Naruto sheathed her blades and the soldiers lowered their objects. Now would you care to give me your names, so that I may call you in for an audience with our leaders? We're Sierra Team. I'm Lieutenant Sarah Smith. To my right is my second-in-command Staff Sergeant Tina Weber and our latest addition Scott Medders. To my left are Lance Corporals Maria Stein and Charlie Barrington. Putting a hand to her headset, Naruto radioed in. My lord, my lady. I have here 5 soldiers that are here to escort your daughter to the mainland. Shall I escort them up to the castle? Yes. I understand. I'll give them the tour. Yes, I will be there. Turning back to the group she said. Please follow me and keep your weapons away. Our kingdom has been in a time of peace for over 1,000 years. Please come along. I have been ordered to answer all of your questions regarding our kingdom's history. Follow me please. As she led them through the town, she started explaining things about her home. So you've been a monarchy for over 1,000 years? L.C. Stein asked wide-eyed. Yes, even longer if some of the texts in our archives are to be believed. We started out as a tribe of people who got lost out at sea. After we were washed up on these shores, we claimed this island as our own. Naturally, conflicts of interests arose and were dealt with, but over time we became one people again. After that we built our kingdom, one brick at a time. Over time the Uzumaki clan had proven its superiority in both combat and politics. And so ever since there has been an Uzumaki on the throne. They continued to walk and were nearly 3/4 of the way to the castle. Excuse me ma'am, but we never got your name, said P. Medders. Oh, how rude of me. Uzumaki Nichibatsu, at your service, she said with a bow. So are you also royalty? Asked Elsie Barrington. No, I lost my right for succession when my preferences in mates became common knowledge. So you had your title disowned because of who you like to, S.S. Weber. Yes, but it is all within its right. With my preferred choice of mate, I could never mother a successor. No successor means no leader for the next generation, which would lead to the downfall of our entire kingdom. If you don't mind me speaking freely, ma'am, in our culture, there are laws against discrimination against those kinds of preferences, Lieutenant Smith. That may be, but remember we are not in your culture and our way of life has kept this kingdom alive for over a millennium. Besides, now that I am no longer legible for the throne, I am the personal guard of my little sister. I am her sword and her shield, her guide and her servant. And so I am here to protect her and accompany her. I see, so you will be traveling with us as well. Yes, I will. I have been studying up on much of your culture and I have understood many of your customs, however this new technology and transportation still has me baffled. Well, if that is the case, I and my squad are ordered to escort you until the princess has been brought to school. We were told one of her guard would take up protecting her. Yes, in that week I am to learn the basics of your technology, however I am afraid, it is going over my head. Well, how about I hand you over to Stein? She's our communications expert, as well as our technical expert. There is nothing in modern technology that she cannot understand. I would appreciate that. And here we are. Welcome to the castle of the Whirlpool. She led them through the castle to the throne room. At the end of the room on 2 thrones sat Namikaze Minato and Uzumaki Kushina. Upon entering the room she bowed and then made her way to the thrones. Mother, father, she said after stopping in front of them. Guard, retrieve our daughter and return here. We will talk with these outsiders. Bowing, Naruto left the room and started sketching a Jiken Bushin. She'd be wearing her same attire, however there would be key differences in her character as well as her appearance and minor differences in clothes. She created the clone and looked her over. The princess had crimson hair which was pulled into a ponytail. She also didn't have the whisker marks. Her eyes had a purple tinge to them. She was the same height as Naruto had been during the Chunin exams. Her trench coat was a dark blue with the crimson Uzumaki swirl, along with the words Uzu no Hime in crimson. Other than that the outfit hadn't changed that much. She nodded at the clone and soon it was a bundle of energy. Really, Nei-chan? We're really going across the ocean. Yes, Lil One. And you'll be going to school in a big city, so we can learn from our new allies. And they can learn from us. Come on, there are some friends who are going to help us get settled in our new home. They're in the throne room with Ka-san and Tu-san. And off she went. Naruto followed the princess and soon was back in the throne room. Naruto jumped at the 5 soldiers giggling like she had gotten a new present. Unfortunately, all she could speak was Japanese so the soldiers could do nothing but try and contain the small flurry of energy. Hime, please calm down, Naruto said, now having put on her fox-featured Anbu mask. Hi. Kitsune-chan. She jumped off of the outsiders and jumped next to her protector. Bowing down she said in Japanese. Good day. My name is Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto. Thank you for taking time to show me around your homeland. After a quick translation the 5 soldiers waved and nodded. If it is all right with you, we will take our leave now, Lieutenant Smith said. With that they left. Walking to the beach Naruto started wondering how they were going to get off of the island. When asked she learnt that the strange contraption was a flying machine, one that could hover and lift heavy things. Naruto suppressed a snort. If she wanted to fly and lift heavy she could just use senjutsu. But she had to settle with stipulations. She was no sitting in a seat in the cargo bay of the machine. To her right sat Naruto. She had said before they entered that she was to be referred to as Kitsune. To her left sat Stein, who was currently running her through what she referred to as the internet. From what she gathered it was a highly complex network of numerous points of data input gathered in a virtual space to be available for everyone. Not unlike a summoning network for weapons from a central armory. It was quite fascinating. She also asked how the world communicated, learning that there were relays in the outer atmosphere of the plane called satellites relaying signals from a handheld headset through a certain type of tower, to a satellite, to another one of those mobile phones, all across the globe. Very fascinating. And the most important piece of knowledge for her was the weaponry. It would seem that this world relied on kinetic projectile weaponry. These guns came in a wide variety of purposes and uses. The gun fired bullets, which held the projectiles as well as explosive gunpowder within a casing. Quite devastating if Stein was to be believed. A few minutes later they landed. "Ladies and gentlemen," came the voice of Weber from the speakers. "I am happy to inform you that we have just landed at our destination. Please make sure that all of your personal belongings are on your person. We would also like to thank you for choosing Sierra Air for your easy traveling pleasures abroad. Please remain in your seats until the rear hatch is opened fully and the transport has arrived and the doors have been opened. Once again, we would like to thank you for choosing Sierra Air for your easy traveling pleasures abroad." 2 minutes later, the rear hatch opened, revealing 2 black SUVs with tinted windows. "Those are Landstalkers. We got these straight from the president himself. Reinforced titanium armor plating, solid rubber tires. The windows are made from the same material the space program uses for their shuttle windows. They weigh more than your average car, but still drive just as good. In short, nothing less than a tank can stop these. Now we have reservations at the Banner Hotel and Spa, down at the beach in Del Perro. That'll be our safe house until we can find you a home of your own. All costs have already been paid. Once you have what you need, you and Naruto can enjoy the West Coast a little," Smith told Kitsune. "All right. All gear gets put into the vehicles. I want to move out in 5." 5 minutes later they were on the road. Naruto was excited and was just dying to see the beach. So they made a list of what to do. They loaded of the gear in the hotel rooms, and then secured them appropriately. Afterwards Kitsune, Naruto, Smith and Medders would go shopping for some beach equipment, while Stein, Barrington and Weber went to procure the 2 Uzumaki's smartphones, as well as information for houses and setting her up with a bank account. The sun was beginning to set and the Uzumakis were now in their room eating something called pizza. In a word, it was delicious, and it was probably the best thing she had ever tasted, right after ramen, of course. After they were done eating, they got ready for bed. Lying down, she turned on the television, a device that worked like a headset, only with moving pictures. She flipped through the channels and stopped on the news channel. The screen showed the 2 news anchors Jim Harrison and Sheila Hall. Both were looking at the camera. "Hi and good evening, I'm Jim Harrison," said the man. "And I'm Sheila Hall," said the woman. "Tonight at 10, meteor shower viewing in Del Perro. Stocks are going up. The weather is getting warmer and the city is now home to real royalty," Jim summarized. "First, this weekend people can come and watch meteors flying through the sky all over the state, and as usual, the party at Del Perro Beach is expected to be the biggest one," said Sheila. "That's right, folks, so hurry on down to the beach, because that is one party you do not want to miss out on. Due to the current stable conditions of the global currencies, the stock market is booming. If you want to make money, folks, buy and sell now." "That's right, Jim. The way things are looking, many of our local stockholders will be going home happy this weekend. In weather news, weather is getting warmer." Now switching over to Trip Michaels at the weather map. "Trip, what can you tell us about this?" "Well, Jim, the science community is still not sure what is contributing to this ongoing heat wave, but they do agree that it is not normal. While temperature spikes such as this one are normal every other year, this ongoing heat wave has surpassed the records and is showing no signs of letting up. In other words, the situation is very unusual," Tripp said. "And speaking of very unusual situations, have you ever heard of the Whirlpool Kingdom? If not, well, that's no surprise. The kingdom was an isolated nation about 200 miles off the western shore and have only recently opened their borders to foreigners. 2 days ago, the King and Queen of Whirlpool visited President Obama and have agreed on establishing trading routes, as well as the chance for a cultural exchange. In light of this new allegiance, the King and Queen of Whirlpool have decided to enlist their daughter and the heiress to the throne as a high school student here in our city. That's right. If rumors are to be believed, the Princess of Whirlpool will be a student at Jackson High School. Along with her is her elite guard, only known as Kitsune. You know her when you see a white mask with features resembling a fox. So from all of us at Weasel, we wish you a good start and welcome to San Andreas. Welcome to Los Santos." And with that she turned it of and muttered, "Welcome to Los Santos." Chapter 2. Grand Theft Auto. Kitsune no Dorobo, welcome to Los Santos. Over the week, Kitsune had sent out hanged cage bushin throughout Los Santos, having them discreetly procure blood and gather as much information about everything in the libraries. It was a very eventful week, which started with an interview at the Weasel Network station. After that, she had familiarized herself with the functions of her new smartphone, and using it to acquire numerous addresses all over the city, to see if any of the offered houses struck her fancy. The next day she had to get her driver's permit. That in itself was very nerve-grating, as the instructor she had was very irritating, not really teaching her anything, but instead just stared at her figure. The unfortunate advantage her higher sensory capabilities had in cars was that she could smell the hormones rolling off of the man. It took all of 5 minutes until she had to roll down the windows, else she might have done something that would have left the man dead or dying and her in jail. However, she now had a permit and would be able to get her license the following year. The local law enforcement was very skeptical about letting her drive with her face mask on. Stein had done a fabulous job, using connections she had made during her time as a soldier to not only get her a bank account with no fees but also very high interest rates. Online banking was also no problem anymore, and they soon found a wonderful house in Vinewood Hills on Wispymound Drive. She also bought a parking garage, which was immediately secured by Sierra team with the latest, state-of-the-art security systems available. It was located in Rockford Hills. She left the park house open for the public, however she reserved the rights to move cars to different spots in the building so she could have one story for herself. She also had a dozen hyenas come into Los Santos to act as security guards, with permission to use incapacitating firearms at will. After moving into their Vinewood Hills, Kitsune looked into local businesses and purchased the Burton branch of an auto repair chain called Los Santos Customs, so she could repair and customize the vehicles she was going to be procuring for study, the Strawberry branch of Amu Nation, which also had a gun range, so she could master all the different firearms and get huge discounts on the ammunition. She also bought a bungalow in Sandy Shores. The lake was just the thing she needed to relax. After that, she had to register Naruto as a student at the high school, which along with the other branches of the educational system was located at the Los Santos University. After filling out mountains of paperwork, for expenses, materials, books, tutors, as well as a hard-won battle to be allowed to attend the classes to keep an eye on her, Naruto was now a student. The next thing on the list for her was procuring means of transportation. She had bought a selection of vehicles after discussing each and every one of the choices with Stein. First was a pickup truck, the Vapid Sandking XL in dark blue. On the bonnet was the design of her face mask in crimson, and on the doors was the Uzumaki crest. The second vehicle was recommended to her for the fun in the outdoors in Sandy Shores. It was an ATV, the Nagasaki Blazer. She had it sprayed dark blue with the Uzumaki crest at the front. The third was an American Muscle, the Bravado Gauntlet with the same coloration as the Sand King. The final car was a military SUV, the Crusader, with the same coloration as the Sand King. Most of the time, she was driving around in the Vapid Sand King XL. It was a good truck with 4-seat as well as a lot of loading room. After getting that sorted, Kitsune inquired about different licenses for fishing, hunting, flying and sailing. She was told she would be tested and where to go to get the documentations. Again, L.C. Stein was a huge help in helping her getting everything organized. She also was scheduled for flying school. Other than that, Kitsune was just familiarizing herself with the city, buying food supplies, clothes for Naruto, buying firearms and other essentials. It was Saturday, and Naruto was currently in the kitchen doing her work in English. This of course was a ruse, so Sierra team wouldn't get suspicious. As soon as they left the next day, Naruto would speak English fluently. Kitsune's research with her clones had brought back a vast number of events and information which was currently still being analyzed and categorized by the scribes on Whirlpool. Kitsune had gained a phenomenal amount of knowledge and was already starting on theories and ideas. Her most important project was a means to make her cars cleaner and more efficient. She was listening to the radio. A report about the ongoing gang rivalries in the city was what had captured her interest. It would seem that a lot of these gangs worked like low-level shinobi on a very basic level. She wasn't worried, however. The house was outside of gang territory, so was the school. And the places within the territories would not be visited by Naruto alone. After the report ended, she walked outside onto the patio. She sat down and enjoyed the sun. The house was nearly empty today. Lieutenant Smith was gone to get her team's next assignment briefing, and P. Metters was out getting transport for the Landstalkers to Washington, D.C. ready. Weber was in the kitchen helping Naruto. L.C. Barrington was keeping an eye on the front door while sitting in the living room watching a sport, revolving around throwing, catching and carrying an egg-shaped ball to one end of a field. He called it American football. And finally L.C. Stein was on the patio as well, talking to someone on her phone. Judging from her body language she was getting good news, when all of a sudden that changed. Really, Leon? That is awful. And there is no other way. You have to close it down. But what about the girls? Can you really do that to them? I know you got a very big opportunity, but you have to understand that that place is the only thing keeping those girls from a life as a whore for some two-bit pimp who won't treat any of them even halfway human. Yes, I'll come by as soon as I can. It will probably be very late though since I'm on duty. Yes, I'll call once I can come. She put her phone down and sighed heavily. Kitsune heard a few curses under her breath and decided to offer her assistance. Miss Stein, is there a problem? She asked with a kind tone. Nothing to do with the safety to you or your sister, ma'am, came the rigid response. But there is a problem. If it is anything I can help with, please tell me. I am in your debt after all for teaching me so much about modern technology. I am sure we can come up with a decent solution, Kitsune persisted. Sighing deeply once again, Stein answered. The person I was just talking to is my brother Leon. He and I grew up in one of the tougher neighborhoods. Down in Strawberry. CGF territory. Those wannabe gangsters have had that hood for decades, hustling drugs, dealing with women, selling weapons, warring with the Ballas and the Los Vargos. When we got old enough I joined the forces and sent every dime I didn't need to him so he could build a place where young kids who wanted out could go and start over. We have a detox center in there as well as education from volunteers and people who made it out and got successful. Nowadays the place is pretty self-sufficient as a strip club, but I still send money his way, because it is a worthy investment. If my money can help give some of those kids chances I never had at that age, then I am all too happy with staying in the forces for as long as I've been. But sadly the whole thing has to end. My brother got a job in Liberty City, and no one wants to take over. The buyers that were interested, were not going to continue helping those kids and, if we don't find a solution soon, Leon will have to close the place down. Stein was showing no signs of sadness, but her voice had betrayed her. She really cared for the kids in her old neighborhood, and while Kitsune had no idea of the situation in the area, she knew herself how much it meant for someone who wanted to start over to actually get that chance. In her mind, she had already decided to help, now all she needed to do was convince the two siblings that she could help. Well, let's get going then. I'll drive. Call your brother, tell him we'll be coming over now. She walked to the kitchen to fetch her keys. Naruto, I'll be going out for a bit. Behave and don't cause too much excitement. If you're good, we'll go sweet shopping tomorrow. The girl was bouncing up and down on her chair nodding. She got into the Sand King and waited. Seconds later Stein got in. Kitsune started towards Strawberry. As soon as she entered the neighborhood, she could see what Stein meant by rough. It wasn't horrible, but there were obvious signs of neglect. As they pulled up to the strip club, Kitsune noticed a group of girls, barely looking a day older than 17, being harassed and cornered by a larger group of men. All of them were wearing green caps and jackets. CGFs, Stein muttered. Kitsune parked the car and jumped out. Stein stayed in the truck but got out her phone and started recording. You know, Kitsune started. I do believe that those lovely ladies have made it quite clear that they have no interest in doing anything with you. So if you fine gentlemen would be so kind and vacate the premises so that they can get going where they are going, I'd be much obliged, Kitsune said kindly. You hearin' this bitch? I think we's needs to teach her a lesson, thug number 1 said. Yeah. I'm dying to find out if that mouth sucks as good as it talks, said thug number 2. How about we find out, thug number 3 said, pulling out a pistol. Now we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way, thug number 1 said. Either way, you'll be sucking my dick before too long. Kitsune calmly walked up to them. The 8 CGFs had completely forgotten about the girls, who were now hiding behind garbage containers. Kitsune walked up to thug number 3, who was licking his lips in anticipation. He grabbed her breasts and squeezed. Then squeezed harder when she didn't utter a sound. Then Kitsune struck. Fast as lightning she had disarmed him, and with a chop to the neck he went down. The others jumped at her intending to beat her bloody. Their punches went wide however as Kitsune kept dodging and countering. Within half a minute the last thug crumbled to the floor, having received a combat boot square to the face. "Miss Stein," Kitsune called out. "There should be a box of cable binders on the back seat. Would you be so kind and bring it here?" sounding not in the least bit winded. Stein did, and soon the 8 CGFs were in the loading bay of the Sand King with their hands tied behind their backs and their feet bound to their wrists, as an improvised hogtie. Kitsune looked to the 3 girls who had come out of hiding. "I apologize for having to witness such horrible pleasantries. Please allow me to escort you to your destination." The girls were too shocked to speak, but nodded. "Miss Stein, would you mind riding in the back? Wouldn't want our new friends to getting any funny ideas now, would we?" Stein nodded and jumped into the back. Naruto got back into the driver's seat and looked at the girl next to her. "So where to?" she asked. "Just down the road," the girl answered. "The Vanilla Unicorn." Kitsune nodded and drove off. A few minutes later they stopped outside of the building. The girls got out and went in. Naruto saw Stein jump off as well and got out of the cabin. "Here we are," Stein said. "The Vanilla Unicorn. Leon should be in the office. Are our friends still sleeping?" When Stein nodded, Naruto locked the car and followed her inside. The office was on the far side of the building, so they had to cross the entertainment area. Kitsune kept an eye out for anything. Soon they stood in the office and Stein was catching up with her brother. "So my sister tells me you're interested in buying the unicorn. Now why should I sell it to you?" The serious voice of the man instantly put Kitsune in her serious persona as well. "Well, if what I have heard is correct, you have no other choice than to sell to me, as if my information is correct, you have to leave by the end of next week. On top of that, you are the type of person who looks out for those under his care, which is why you are refusing to sell to those who do not view your communal project as worthwhile. But mainly, because I am looking to continue your efforts. Maybe even expand them, buy the adjacent buildings. Where I come from, we do not have the problems with gangs as you have here. And orphans are never encountered in these conditions. Whirlpool has an excellent policy for orphans that has served us well for decades, and I am certain with a few tweaks it can be implemented for your establishment. After all, I hear most of those girls dancing out there were previously kids you helped get off of the streets. Or is that information incorrect?" Leon stared at her. Then slowly he grinned and started laughing. "Ha ha. I like her, Maria. She's different, but that's cool. So how much you willing to pay?" 50 grand with the promise that the communal project will continue. Also I want you to still be listed as manager. It'll make things easier down the road. I pay the bills, you come here every other week and interact with the people who are important. I'd say it's a win-win for the both of us. Wouldn't you agree?" Kitsune said, not missing a beat. "Say what now?" Leon choked. "You heard me, I'll have the money on your table in an hour. Stein, could you give me directions to the law enforcement office?" "I'll come with you. Leon has to talk with those 3 girls now." Leon nodded and the 2 women made their way back to the car. Driving though the city always made Kitsune nervous. It wasn't the traffic. Worst came to worst, the Sand King would just roll over most of the other vehicles. No, she was nervous, because everything was too tall for her liking. And that the city was way too out of touch with nature. It pained her to think the damage the city was causing it and made a goal to look into options to help make the city healthier. Arriving at the LSPD HQ, Kitsune reversed to the main entrance and got out of the car. She climbed onto the truck bed and started to unceremoniously dump the still unconscious gang members onto the sidewalk. The officer inside came running out yelling at her, but were silenced when they saw her mask. Dropping the last CGF onto the ground, Kitsune walked up to the closest officer. "I would like to report these men and have them arrested," she said calmly. And on what charges would I be arresting them, ma'am? The officer replied. 8 accounts of public harassment and molesting of minors. And if that is not enough, molesting an ambassador of a foreign nation, threatening said ambassador at gunpoint, and attempted assault on a foreign ambassador. An ambassador with close ties to the ruling family. Yes, ma'am, though do you have any evidence of this? Of course. Stein, would you show the man the video you took? Stein nodded and pulled out her phone playing the video. After which she sent it to the officer, so he could put it into evidence. After a brief stop at an ATM, Kitsune and Stein returned to the Unicorn. They walked into the office and Kitsune drooped the plastic bag with the money on the table. Leon started counting when they heard a scream. Kitsune walked out and saw 2 men forcing a stripper onto a table. Kitsune made her way to them. Excuse me, gentlemen, but would it be too much to ask that you leave the lady alone? Kitsune asked. And who are you? One of them asked. The new owner. Now either leave my employee alone, or I will be forced to resort to less pleasant means of removing you from her. Yeah, whatever, bitch, the man said, pushing her away. That was your last strike. Kitsune grabbed the 2 men's heads and slammed them together, knocking them out cold. She dragged them outside and woke them up with a couple of slaps to the face. Inside of the Unicorn, everyone could hear screams. A few minutes later, those men came crawling in their hands. Stopping in front of the stripper, they apologized and left on their hands and knees. Seconds later, Kitsune walked in. Let that be a warning to everyone here. Hurt those under my care, and I will hurt you so much that you will be begging for death. She walked back into the office and was given the contract. Reading it, she signed and shook Leon's hand. Then they left. Stopping for a quick surprise for Naruto, Kitsune bought a tub of cookie ice cream. She returned and gave Naruto her ice cream. The next day went by pretty quickly. Sierra team had left and Naruto and Kitsune were enjoying the weather, hiking up to the Vinewood sign. It was a good walk. People in this world were rather fragile, Kitsune surmised. But it was worth it. Her phone rang and she checked. It was a notification for all new students of Jackson High. There was an orientation later today. It should have been Friday, but due to plumbing issues had to be moved to today. Kitsune told Naruto and the 2 jogged back. Kitsune pulled up at the filled parking spaces, making use of the off-road capabilities. She parked the Sand King on the other side of the road on the grass. Many of the parents looked at them but promptly ignored them once they realized their children had run off. Naruto and Kitsune got out of the truck and crossed the street. They followed the signs to the central yard where a group of men and women stood. A few minutes later, a mass of students had gathered. Good afternoon, students. Thank you for coming on such short notice. I am the head of the high school department, Mr. Barclay. I will now read your name and give you a number. It is important that you remember your number in order for this to work, the center person bellowed. Mr. Barclay was a tall man, broad shoulders, graying brown hair. His eyes displayed alertness, betraying his years. One look and Kitsune knew that man was a soldier. She'd had to get information on all of Naruto's teachers. As he started to go through the list, she toned out. The list was alphabetical, so she assumed it must have a numerical value to it. Narefkoi Uziameki Namekes. The children laughed and many of the adults chuckled. Reminding herself that she was in a different country with a different language, she forgave the man the mishap. Naturally also, Naruto did not speak up. Narefkoi Uziameki Namekes, please raise your hand. Is she not here, or is my pronunciation that off? The man wondered. Then finally Naruto lifted her hand. I think you might mean me, Mr. Barclay, she said sweetly. And what would your name be, young girl? The man asked with a smile. Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto, the short red head said proudly. Yes, I apologize for my horrible pronunciation. Anyway, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, number 1. Zoe DeSanta, number 1. As the man went on, Naruto was already looking around for all the number 1s. Luckily, they were all pretty close to her, Zoe DeSanta being right next to her. Kitsune watched the princess and saw that there was no stopping her. Zoe DeSanta was going to be her first friend by the end of orientation. Mr. Barclay had finished the list and put it back in his suit jacket. Now does anyone here not remember their number? Good. 1s come to me. 2s to Mrs. Hills. 3s to Ms. Garcia. 4s to Mrs. Lewis. 5s to Mr. Hall. And 6s go to Ms. Taylor. The students scrambled and got into 2 lines. Good. Now we'll be giving you the tour. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. Parents are welcome to follow. However, if you wish to wait, the cafeteria is to the right in the training center. We have a 50% off deal today just for this occasion. They walked of, and many of the parents decided to follow. Kitsune walked back the closest bench and sat down, browsing the online stores for something to buy, but currently she had all she was interested in. Sighing, she put down her phone and looked into the sky. The notification said the orientation would last onwards of 3 hours, so she had time to spare. Maybe go and beat up some gang members. They were weak, but numerous. Just then an older man walked into the sun. "What can I do you for, sir?" she asked, not looking up. "Just wondering how you and your daughter are adjusting," the man said. "After all, you have been in LS for just over a week." "Naruto is not my daughter, she is my sister, as well as heiress to the throne of Whirlpool. I am here as her guardian," she said, standing up. "But thank you for your concern, Mr. DeSanta. Michael. And this is my wife Amanda." Kitsune looked her up and down before looking back at Mr. DeSanta. "You are a lucky man, Mr. DeSanta. I am Kitsune. It is an honor to meet you." "Same. So Ms. Kitsune, how have you been adjusting?" asked Amanda. "Quite good. I have purchased a house up in Vinewood Hills, my driving permit has been allowed and my vehicles have been delivered as well. All in all, Los Santos has been very welcoming." As they chatted, Kitsune kept her sensory abilities trained on Naruto. Going by what she was feeling, the girl was having quite a bit of fun with the DeSanta girl. She and the DeSantas talked about this and that, and quite soon the students were returned. Naruto was tackled by Zoe and had to promise to come find her first thing when she arrived. Smirking under her mask, Kitsune walked to the truck and drove them home. The days went by and Naruto and Zoe had become inseparable. The two had all of their classes together and both were accepted into the cheerleader squad. Naruto was having fun in high school and was accepted very quickly. Add to that even though she was royalty, she still acted like your average 14-year-old, average for an Uzumaki, and her superior agility, Naruto quickly took to the top of the most popular list. She even became vice captain of the cheer squad. PE was always fun to see. Mr. Barclay had been the PT instructor for his entire career. The first lesson they had was an evaluation for their basic fitness level. Needless to say, the red bundle of energy surpassed previous school records with ease. Barclay was very impressed. And so school went on. Kitsune saw no need to attend the classes anymore. She knew Naruto could handle herself well enough without revealing her abilities. And even then, she could signal her and she'd be there in a few seconds. And so a month and a half into the new year, Kitsune was currently sitting in a cafe enjoying a chocolate cake and hot chocolate, browsing through the latest batch of data her Bushin had collected. This last group had collected all it could about modern technology, and now she had a good idea on how to improve her vehicles. It was about time to modify them as well. She'd been driving around in them the way they were delivered, but now that she had a good understanding of the pros and cons of the equipment, maybe she could add her own personal touch to them as well. Just then the normal news program was interrupted. "We interrupt the program for emergency news." The picture showed the university, surrounded by SWAT and the LSPD. Just mere moments ago, a group of armed men entered the university grounds and took the entire ground hostage. There have yet to be demands made, but the LSPD has established a phone line with the group but have yet to speak with them. However, officials are worried that the group may not be interested in a peaceful resolution of the conflict. Kitsune jumped from the table. Quickly paying, she jumped into her Sand King and raced to the university. Over the month, she had made a reputation as a very safe driver, even at high speeds. The LSPD liked her, as she had visited and trained them in some easy incapacitation techniques in hand-to-hand combat. After being tiled by a number of units, the LSPD had her do as she pleased as long as there were no accidents. She turned the radio up and continued listening. The group has just demanded a minivan and a boat, both fully fueled. As of right now, the LSPD is preparing the demands, but is still hoping to resolve the situation without injuries. The tires squealed to a stop and Kitsune went straight to the head of the PD. "Officer Henderson. What's the situation? And don't you dare tell me it's classified," Kitsune was growling. "Miss Kitsune. I am so happy that you're here. The LSPD really need you this time. What are the demands? Well, as you no doubt know, your nation has sunk a number of ships that entered your waters. They took the princess hostage and will not return her until the cargo from these 5 ships has been released to them." He gave her the list and Kitsune tensed. She had read up on the recent reports regarding Whirlpool, as well as the fabricated history. These 5 ships contained substances sealed tightly in metal, were labeled as highly toxic biohazards. The scribes had found them in the caverns under the island that they were now using as archives. They had sealed everything in a scroll and then burnt the scroll. Kitsune looked at him. "How many are there?" "We think about 20. What are you going to do?" "What I was trained to do. Kill all who threaten the princess." With that, Kitsune ran into the first building. Slowly making her way through the corridors, she cleared room for room, sending students she found out the way she came. It took her half an hour to get to the established landline. Growling, she told them it was clear and to collect the corpses. Kitsune ran off after having interrogated the last enemy. She now knew where the rest of the group was. She jumped into the Sandking and raced of 2 police cars hot on her tail. A few minutes later, Kitsune stopped in front of a house on Barbareno Road in Chumash, overlooking the Pacific. Kitsune got out of the truck and lifted the back seat, revealing a hidden compartment with weapons. She grabbed a shotgun, put a suppressor on it and a satchel full of shell. She knocked on the door, ready to fire. The door was opened by a terrified woman. Kitsune pointed her to the police and entered. She quickly terminated the 2 guards on the ground floor and silently moved to the next level. In a room she could hear muffled whimpering. Clearing the rooms one by one, she ended another 2 guards. She walked to the final room and peeked in. On the floor, tied tightly together, were Naruto and Zoe. Zoe was whimpering softly, but Naruto was unconscious. Thinking back, a lot of students at the university were unconscious as well. This would explain why the emergency seal was never activated. Inside the room were another 4 guards. Naruto jumped into the room and fired the remaining 3 shells in the gun and clocked the 4 over the head with the butt of the gun. She woke up Naruto and untied the 2 girls. She told Naruto to get her and Zoe into the truck and shut the doors and wait for her and to give a message to the police. The girl nodded and ran out with her friend. Kitsune waited for 5 minutes before starting. She kicked the man in the groin and woke him up. He screamed in pain. She lifted him up by the scruff of his jacket and threw him against a wall. She grabbed his right arm and pinned it against the wall. She rammed one of the hunting knives the men were carrying through his hand. She did the same to his left hand, suspended him a foot above the floor. Then she pinned his legs to the wall by shoving 2 more knives through his ankles. The man was whimpering at this point, begging for death. "Who gave the order?" Kitsune's tone was even and cold as ice. "Est, T, Teb, B, Ban H, Her, N, Nan, D, Des," said the man through pained sobs. Kitsune nodded and rammed one last knife into his chest, killing him instantly. She walked outside and let the police in. Grabbing one officer, she asked, "Hernandez, Esteban. Where can I find him?" The officer didn't know and Kitsune nodded. She told him that if they needed her for paperwork reasons to call her and left. She drove the girls to the DeSanta residence. As she knocked on the door, Zoe was immediately grabbed by Amanda. "Zoe, we were so worried. When the police said you weren't in school, we thought." She couldn't bring herself to say it and hugged her again. She looked at Kitsune and thanked her. "Could I leave Naruto with you for the night? I think it would be best for the both of them." "Yes, of course. Do you want to come in?" "No. The one who did this is still alive?" Amanda nodded and ushered the children inside. Kitsune returned to her vehicle and called the police chief. "Hernandez, Esteban. Where can I find him?" "No one knows. Perhaps you should ask a business partner of him. Martin Madrazo. Here's his number." Kitsune dialed and it was answered. "Yes, hello," came the rough voice. "Mr. Madrazo? My name is Kitsune. I am looking for a business partner of yours, Hernandez, Esteban. Do you know where I could find him? And what would you do with him once you found him? Miss Kitsune. I'll kill him. He is, I understand, a competitor in your business field. He is, but what has he done to have you hunting for his head? He ordered the kidnapping of my sister. I see. I give you his location and you make sure he does not disturb my business anymore. Perhaps we can meet up afterwards and discuss a business relation? Perhaps. He is on a yacht out by the marinas. It is the big blue one. The name I think is Brisi del Oceano. Kitsune killed the connection and raced to the marina. She jumped out onto the parking lot and ran to the viewing platform. She saw the yacht just sailing out. She jumped into the water and stayed on the ocean floor. Using chakra to breathe and propel herself forwards, she managed to reach the yacht in half an hour. She boarded silently and crept below deck. She would make sure this would look like an accident. After some creative rewiring, the yacht was only going to move in one direction. Now all she needed to do is make sure her target would die of dehydration. Going through the ship, she sealed away all medical and food supplies. After which she knocked out everyone on board and drew paralyzing seals on them. As soon as their hearts stopped beating, the seals would vanish. No evidence left behind. Kitsune dove back into the ocean and casually swam back to shore. Using chakra to dry herself of, Kitsune returned to the Sand King and drove to the residence of Madrazo Martin. He lived in Vinewood Hills in a villa. She stopped and was greeted by the man himself. Miss Kitsune. How wonderful to finally meet you. I trust the situation has been resolved. Of course, as soon as they find him it'll be on the news. So what was this business proposition? It is quite simple. If I require special services, I shall give you a call. In exchange I can give you information, weapons and contacts. If you need information from me, you kindly do me a service. Like today, you needed information, I gave you information. I inquired you to do me a service and you did that service. So do we have an arrangement? Kitsune nodded and left. She drove back to her home and meditated. She had taken a blood sample of each of the men she had killed today and was now going through their memories. Kurama came and laid down on her lap. Absent-mindedly, Kitsune started to stroke her ears. School started up again the following week. And Kitsune promised to help improve the security of the school. She introduced a handful of men and women that had left gangs through the Unicorn and trained them along with the already present campus security. This got her a spot on the board of directors at the school, as well as a position to teach self-defense to students. All in all, Kitsune was very happy to have this opportunity. Chapter 3. Time flies. 5 years later it was summer. Kitsune had replaced herself with a Jiken Bushin and had taken back the mantle of Naruto. A couple of years back, Uzumaki Nichibatsu had been recalled to Whirlpool after having found a wife. Thanks to Western science, she had been artificially inseminated and was returned her right to the throne. Naruto had been all too happy to give it to her. Over her time in high school, she and Zoe DeSanta had grown quite close. Inseparable even. With the growing agitation in the DeSanta home, Zoe had moved into Naruto's home. Not that she minded, Zoe was fun to have around, with her spoiled city girl persona. Right now, they were hiking through the Kiliad Mountain State Wilderness Reserve. They had hiked up Mount Kiliad all the way from Paleto Cove. They had parked their truck by the cable car. The plan was to hike up the mountain and eat their lunch on the peak. And then ride the cable car back down. Right now, they were on the ridgeline heading towards the peak. Come on Zoe, we're nearly there. Just a few hundred more yards, Naruto said, encouraging the exhausted girl. You're a slave driver, Naru. How is this even remotely relaxing? Zoe said between breaths. It is. Kitsune-chan and I used to run this distance back home. You're crazy, Zoe exclaimed. Maybe a little. Come on, the peak is just there. She pointed to the peak just a little further. 5 minutes later, they stepped onto the peak. They looked around and found a nice spot looking out to the ocean. A few minutes later everything was unpacked. And food was being eaten. Naruto had proven herself quite the fan of meat, and was eating one steak after the other. Zoe was happily eating a salad. Look at that view. Makes you want to stay here in the mountains, forever, doesn't it? Naruto mused. Only you would think that this is better than living in Los Santos. Of course, open spaces, no traffic, wildlife, fresh air, what's not to like? The dirt? The fact that there's no electricity, no bathrooms? Oh, come on Zoe, you know the natural life is healthier. Besides, with all this exercise you keep yourself in shape. You think that this vision of perfection comes from driving a truck and sitting behind a desk. I've been training rigorously since I could walk. But the way you eat, you should look like a meatball instead of like an Amazon, Zoe sulked. Ah, don't be jealous. If you'd be more active and actually ate something other than that green stuff you'd actually fill out as well, she said with a lecherous grin. Pervert. Zoe yelled. Yes, but I'm your pervert. Naruto grinned. She finished her 6th steak and packed up her things. She drank a few gulps of water from her canteen and looked at her housemate. Zoe was a beautiful girl, blonde hair going down to her shoulder blades, blue eyes, a lithe frame, a perky B-cup chest, as well as a perky rear. Long legs and light skin. That along with her 5 feet 8 height, made her into quite the sought-after girl. While Naruto was the definition of an Amazonian beauty. Standing proudly at 6 feet 6 she towered over most people. Her crimson hair fell to the small of her back in a single ponytail. Her peach-tan skin gave her an exotic allure. A muscular, yet slender frame and long legs made everyone salivate. Her large chest and shaped rear were target of many cameras. She packed everything up and back into her bag. She strapped it onto her back and helped Zoe to her feet. After that, they walked to the cable cart and started their descent down. The ride was short, well shorter than getting up the mountain. The two girls stepped out of the cart and onto the car park. In front of the entrance stood a benefactor Dusta, in classic black paint job. It was a gift Naruto had given Zoe for her sweet 16. She had customized it with military-grade armor, race brakes, bull bars with winch and lights, rear guard, level 4 Ms. Dual titanium exhaust, smoke intakes, mesh grille, off-road hood with spare, xenon lights, roof rack with spotlights, side steps, competition suspension, a second spare on the tailgate, race transmission, turbo, black dune basher wheels, custom bulletproof tires, black tinted windows. In short, it was the perfect off-road machine. The boot opened and Naruto put the bag inside. She grinned and took out her white straw Stetson, and her black aviator sunglasses. Well, Sugar Cube, shall we be on our way back home then? She said, mimicking a southern drawl, as she entered on the passenger side. Zoe nodded and started the engine. It didn't long and an hour later the two pulled up on yard of Naruto's house. They got out and walked onto the porch. The sun was still high in the sky, and the two girls made full use of it. So Naru, what modules did you get? Zoe asked. Online mostly. I had father talk with the dean who allowed me to take all my modules online. He also extended that to you, sweet cheeks. So, all we have to do is hand in our assignments and that's that. So just relax. And so, the summer was turning to fall and the two found themselves on the beach. Naruto and Zoe were practicing katas from the improved Juken. Naruto had convinced her that doing a martial art would allow her to eat a lot more. Right now, they had attracted quite the crowd. Mostly it was salivating boys with muscles, thinking themselves men. There was also the occasional woman shouting some nonsense or other. Naruto just shook her head. Was she dressed provocatively? Maybe. Was it their problem? Most definitely not. Currently she was wearing a midnight blue bikini with the emblem of Whirlpool on it in crimson. Zoe was wearing a rainbow-colored one. Zoe, is it illegal to put perverts into the intensive care unit? Naruto asked, racking her knuckles. Yes, Naru. That hasn't changed over the last million times you asked, the blonde replied. Oh well, shall we go for a swim? The two started off to the water. Once there, they started to swim. A few hours later, Zoe was absolutely exhausted. Naruto didn't even look winded. They got out of the water and walked up the beach to the car park. On their way, they saw a man in a gray suit walk along the beach and sit down on a bench. Hey Zoe. Isn't that your father? Yeah. Dr. Friedlander lives a few houses up the beach from here, He must have come from one of his talks. Come on, I'm hungry, let's get some burgers. Sure. Naruto got into her gauntlet and Zoe sat down on the passenger seat. She fired up the engine and started to pull out of the parking lot. Just as they were pulling onto the road, they saw a red and a white sports car race each other. Being bored, Naruto ignored some traffic laws and followed them with little effort. They raced past the Life Invader offices and they quickly made a beeline straight through the movie studio. Naruto was silent, while Zoe was both laughing and crying. They shot out of the studios and after a few crossings took a left. Zoe's screams reached an all-time high as Naruto drifted through the turn with ease, staying in her lane the entire time. After a few more beautiful drifts, Naruto had followed the two cars to the Union Depository. She heard the LSPD roll in and calmly drove away, all the while listening to Zoe's laughing. The two drove towards Lake Vinewood, stopping only at the Cluckin' Bell on Las Lagunas Boulevard. Once they arrived, Naruto parked her car and the two walked to the lake. After climbing over the fence, the two sat down at the beach and enjoyed their burgers. Zoe had ordered a veggie burger, while Naruto had a triple patty bacon ravisher, with extra servings of bacon. Once they were done, they packed up and left. The drive to the house was short. Naruto sighed, they'd be doing some coursework for university. They turned on the TV and watched a documentary about how Earth would react if there was an extraterrestrial invasion. It was quite interesting. After finishing the week's work, the two girls jumped into the jacuzzi and relaxed. The next morning the two woke up and had a self-made yogurt with honey, fruits and nuts. As always, Naruto amazed Zoe with her skills in the kitchen. Zoe had not talent in the kitchen. The one time she tried surprising her girlfriend with food, she had started to make spaghetti and had managed to set the pasta in flames. Needless to say, Naruto had banned her from doing any work in the kitchen without supervision. And while Zoe had no talent at all, Naruto was a very calm and patient teacher. After breakfast, they jumped onto their mountain bikes and made their way to the university. The trip was short and relaxing. If you knew how to beat the morning rush, cycling in LS was quite the joy. After dropping of the week's work, the two headed to the fitness center. After changing into their training outfits, a pair of dark blue track pants, and a short belly-free, dark blue tank top with the Uzumaki crest on the back. Her red hair was tied in a high ponytail. Zoe wore tiger-striped pair of yoga pants and a black skin-tight tank top. Naruto walked through the rows of gym equipment and headed for the treadmills. Zoe followed and set her distance for 5 kilometers. Naruto sighed and did the same after donning a 25-kilogram weight vest. 25 minutes later, the two were on the yoga mats doing crunches, sit-ups, push-ups, chin-ups and jumping lunges. Once they were done with that, Naruto noticed some students watching them. Not that she blamed them. Zoe in yoga pants was a very enticing sight indeed. The two continued with a few sets of bench presses and then ended their workout with a spar in the boxing ring. After Naruto had catapulted Zoe over her shoulder and squashed her with her own momentum, by landing on her, Naruto swiftly slipped into a hold to subdue the still struggling Zoe. A 10 count later, the two jumped out of the ring and did some yoga to cool down. Once they were done, the two walked into the showers and rinsed off. Walking back outside, the two noticed a group of students circling around a fight. Sighing, Naruto walked over, watching the embarrassing display by an obviously less fit student against a trained opponent. It took a few minutes before she stepped in and ended the fight with a jab to the trained student's forehead. The student fell to the ground stunned. Naruto caught and slowly lowered the beaten student to the ground, before giving him a quick look over to check for any major injuries. He was still fully aware of his surrounding and besides a few painful bruises nothing severe was wrong. Naruto and Zoe left, ignoring the booze and the invitations to something called a beatdown party. Naruto felt the idea was idiotic. She liked fighting just as much as the next Uzumaki, but she had no interest to fight weaker opponents. The two jumped onto their bikes and made their way to the hills. The trails were fun to ride and they even allowed the girls to see some deer. At noon, they returned and quickly changed into something more comfortable. Zoe wore some very short denims, a blue bikini with turquoise lotus flowers, a blue Hawaiian shirt and blue flip-flops, Naruto was wearing a pair of black combat boots, camouflage cargo pants, a camouflage short belly-free tank top and a camouflage hoodie jacket tied around her waist, with her white straw Stetson and a pair of dark crimson aviators. The two girls jumped into Naruto's bravado gauntlet and drove to the multi-story car park in Rockford Hills. Naruto parked the gauntlet and got into her Sand King. She checked her arsenal of weapons, as well as the gear in the bay. Firing up the engine, Naruto drove out and headed for Vespucci Beach. As she turned onto the main road leading to the beach, her trip was ruined by a speeding motorcycle. The green two-wheeler ran head first into the reinforced bumper of her truck. The man's head split open on the steel hook. Naruto saw a white bravado buffalo pull up and two African-American men stepped out. One of them wore a green LS cap. Naruto could see the bulge of a pistol at belt height in his shorts. Grabbing her medical supplies and her stun gun, she strapped the holster to her right leg and strapped a kunai holster to her left. She told Zoe to call the cops while she took care of the accident. She stepped out of the truck and checked the pulse of the man, all the while keeping her eyes on the two men. One of them was slowly inching towards the bike, while the one with the cap was slowly reaching for his pistol. A few seconds later, sirens were heard and the green-capped man grabbed his pistol and started shooting. Naruto grabbed the dead man and used him as shield. "The fuck, Lamar? Stop shootin' and get in the motherfucking car. We'll meet at the car wash." The shorter man yelled and jumped onto the bike and raced off. Lamar emptied his magazine and raced off as well. Naruto sighed. The dead man had taken 5 bullets. The ground had 2 and the others were in her truck. Seconds later the LSPD arrived. After giving their statements, Naruto and Zoe were allowed to leave. Sighing in disappointment, Naruto and Zoe parked on the beach. The two took out 2 shovels and dug a shallow pit. After that, they walked along the beach and gathered driftwood. Naruto still had a sack full in the bay of the truck. Walking around the main lifeguard station they found a large trunk. Once again, Naruto proved her strength by shouldering a protruding limb and dragging the wood back to the truck. Once there, she took out an axe and started chopping the wood. Half an hour later the trunk was cut to pieces. A few minutes later, the fire was going and Naruto was grilling some venison with a couple of skewers. Over the 4 years, Naruto had made countless contacts and had shown her skills that were certified by the respective people in the city. She was allowed as much as a special ops soldiers on survival training, regarding camping in the hills and making campfires. Once they were done grilling the meat they sat back and enjoyed their meal. Once they were done, the fire was put out with seawater and the wood that was large enough was packed up. The rest was buried in the sand. The two got back into the truck and drove to Strawberry. Having nothing but time, Zoe had suggested they get part-time jobs. She didn't like being financially on her family, so Naruto had jokingly suggested working as dancers at the Vanilla Unicorn. So, the next day, they were hired. Zoe had become famous as a sexy kitten. Naruto, using her size and her love of foxes, had become one of the favorites as a kitsune Amazon warrior. As they pulled up, the guard at the door walked up to her. "Hey, small boss lady," the man said with a grin. "Hey there, Marcus. Everything all right? No undesirables?" she asked. "No," Marcus replied. "Not since you decided to dress the last pair up in pink bikinis and having them pull that cart all over Strawberry." Naruto chuckled at the memory. The two had been making unwanted advances to one of her girls. She had knocked them out, waxed them, put them in pink latex bikinis and dressed them up as pink pony girls. After that she hooked them up in front of a one-person carriage and whipped them into shape, quite literally. Both of them had left Los Santos the following day. "But anyway, what brings you here, lil lady? You only come here on the weekends." "Yes, but we had a bad start in the day and some punk put bullets in my bumper. Some fool called Lamar. His friend seems intelligent enough, but they left me with a dead body." "Huh? Sounds like you ran into some gangbangers." "Yes. Could you be a dear and take the truck to the garage and have it checked and cleaned? With me here, security should be just as good." "Of course." Naruto handed the man a grand and headed inside. Once inside, they went to the dressing rooms and changed. Zoe quickly made her makeup, which consisted of whiskers and her nose, as well as making the eyes seem larger. She slipped into her pink lace with a black cattail standing off from it and put on some large black cat ears. She completed the look with a ribbon around her tail, a collar with a silver bell and some kitten gloves. Giving a playful meow, she skipped out onto the stage. Cheery and playful music started playing. Naruto shook her head and got into her attire. A leopard piece of cloth covered her chest. She wore a leopard loincloth with it. She then attached her large foxtail and her ears. After that, she started coloring her skin to an orange-red tone. Lastly, she made her eyes seem larger and added whiskers. The only thing she added now was a few tribal markings and she was done. She stepped into the backstage area and waited for her music. A minute later the music died down, and some deep drums filled the room with a slow rhythm. Soon chants entered the mix and along with some flutes. Naruto stepped out onto the stage and started to do her routine. After a couple of hours, Naruto and Zoe were in the showers. "Awesome show as always, guys," said Cheetah, a girl that was native to Strawberry. "Thanks, see. Maybe we can have another wildcat hunt soon, eh? I recall you seem to enjoy it quite a lot," Naruto said with a grin. The short red-headed girl blushed as bad as her hair, and quickly shot out of the showers. Naruto turned back to Zoe, she too was blushing madly. Naruto chuckled and dried off. Getting dressed, she walked into the office, to make sure the Uzumaki warrior was fine. The safe was filled with stacks of small and medium bills. A paper was glued to the door. They needed $250,000 to buy the adjacent buildings. Over the 4 years they had been taking lesser amounts of their profits to save up. Now they had finally saved up enough. Naruto grabbed the money and waited for Zoe. A minute later, the two got into the now cleaned and repaired truck. Naruto fired up the engine and drove off. After talking to Leon in Liberty City, he was delighted to hear that things were coming along nicely. The remainder of the day was spent talking with owners of the adjacent stores and buying properties. The stores were still in operation and would continue to be, however there were new rules placed and a part of the profits went to the community project, and to give applicants of the project priority over other applicants. Into the back area, there now stood tents where many of the people who had made some positive changes to their lives through the project. There was a tent where kids got tuition. There was a tent with food and some tents with fames or just to hang out and talk. The wonderful thing was that the city had given some resources for the project. There had also been numerous donations from businessmen all over the country. One of which was a prominent businessman from Liberty City. After that, Naruto drove home and had some food. Naruto and Zoe changed the Sand King back for the Gauntlet. After driving around for a while, Naruto got a call from a fellow mechanic. She put the call on the car's speaker. "What can I do for you, how? Need another mechanic to help with orders?" Naruto said. "Not this time, Naru. There's a race going later tonight, but 2 drivers have been jailed. You interested?" "Sure. Tell me when and where." "Chamberlain Hills, Forum Drive. I'll take care of the other racer." "Thanks a lot, Naru." "Oh yeah. Prize for first place is $200. I'll be there." Naruto revved the engine and raced off. A few minutes later, she drifted around the corner and came to a stop at the start line. A few minutes later she got a text confirming the race. She parked it on the side of the road and stepped out of the car. Opening the boot, she got out a mini grill and a freezer box. Firing up the grill, she presented Zoe with a handful of marinated chicken legs. Seeing the look on her girlfriend's face, she sighed and pulled out a bowl of salad. "We still have a couple of hours, why not enjoy some food while we wait? Here, homemade salad and my secret Naruto Uzumaki secret marinade." She put the meat on the flames and waited for the other racers to show up. After a while, Hao showed up with his orange Meibatsu Penumbra. Shortly afterwards a blue Obey 9F Cabrio pulled up. A few minutes later 2 black Trufade Adders. A second later, a deep green Grati Carbonizare pulled up. Naruto walked up to Hao and greeted him. "So, what's the rundown on the racers? I know all the serious racers in the city and I've never seen these guys here." "They're from out of town. The 9F is from New Mexico, apparently, he's a professional. The Carbonizare is from downstate, He's a drag racer, so this'll be fun. The two adders are LC's racing Bonnie and Clyde. They're called that because they clean out every racer they ever raced. Interesting. And this other guy, who is he? A friend of mine from upstate. She's a pretty lax girl, drives a customized Vapid Bullet. Here she is now. Around the corner pulled a pink Vapid Bullet. The car pulled up and out stepped a short, tan, brunette with pink stripes on the right side of her head. She wore a fancy light pink blouse, skin-tight, black leather pants and a black leather jacket. As she walked, Naruto heard the clacking of her heels. The girl stepped in front of her and eyed her. Naruto straightened herself and pushed her shoulders back, showing off her entire build. Her muscled 6'6" build was usually enough to keep anyone from doing something stupid without first considering the outcome. Add to that she had black size 12 military combat boots, her camouflage cargo pants, her camouflage short belly-free tank top that revealed her well-maintained abdominal muscles. Her six-pack and her external obliques were tensing and relaxing, showing of the hidden power within them. Lastly, her large chest and muscled arms showed anyone that she was a jaguar more than a house cat. As always, Naruto had her hip-long red hair tied in a high pony and then had it braided down. Tied around her waist was her camouflage hoodie jacket. All in all, she looked ready for a fight. "How? This your new girl?" the girl asked. "What? Oh, hell no. Naruto ain't interested. Besides, the last guy that tried was found passed out and buried to his neck in dirt in the park. I'm not going to end up like that," Hao said quickly. "To be fair though," Naruto interjected, "he did try to drug me. I did the community a favor by castrating his sorry ass. But enough with the chit-chat, I came here to race. What is it gonna be, standard circuit or the sprint? We could also sew an ABA, I'm fine with either." The girl's right, besides, I want to try something new. Never did an ABA, so let's go with that. Alright. Everyone, out of their cars and asses over here, Naruto bellowed. This is how it's going down. It's a little something of a local play, so listen up. What we're gonna do is what we here call an ABA starting line is point A. It doubles as the finish. Point B is the roundabout at the courts center. Put it in your GPS now and activate the route. This here is a sprinkler fountain. It's bright blue, so everyone can see it. It's got a duration of 1 minute, when it's dead we go. Any questions? Good. Start up as you arrived. Now get in your cars. Naruto walked to the start line and lit the fuse to the small firework. A few seconds later, a fountain of bright blue sparks shot up. Naruto got in her car and started her engine. Zoe punched the courts center. Revving the engine, Naruto was counting the seconds in her head. The instant the sparks died, she raced off around the corner onto Carson Avenue. Her squealing tires leaving black lines on the road. She turned the corner onto Innocence Boulevard, dodging traffic and leaving her opponents behind. Crossing over Calais Avenue, she took a back alley and drifted onto South Rockford Drive. Using all of the power her self-built 4.5 L V8 twin-turbo engine, she blasted along South and then North Rockford Drive, making sure to keep enough space between her and any potential traffic. Once Courts Drive was in sight, she briefly slammed on the brakes and turned, then quickly shifting into second, flooring the accelerator, she slid around the corner. Stabilizing, she shifted back and raced up the road. The hairpin was drifted and so was the roundabout. Naruto now was nervous. The road was a standard 2 lanes, and many racers went for the perfect line, cutting into oncoming traffic. She went around the hairpin as fast as she could without slipping and raced down the hill. She was greeted by the pink bullet and the 2 black adders. Back on North Rockford Drive, she saw Hao's orange Penumbra battling it out with the green Carbonizare. She saw the blue F9 not far behind them. She kept blasting on along South Rockford Drive and onto Dutch London Street. Driving on the wrong side of the road, Naruto dodged the traffic and tuned onto Davis Avenue. She was soon on Strawberry Avenue and drifted into the northwest end of Forum Drive. She screeched to a halt past the finish and parked her car on her parking spot, waiting for the others. First came Bullet, tightly followed by 1 adder, then the Penumbra and the F9. After that came the Carbonizare and the other adder. The second adder was blasting smoke like a wildfire. Naruto offered to fix it for free, seeing as her shop was not far from the finish. She called an Uzumaki guard to bring a tow truck and waited with the keys. After getting her money, she was left alone with Zoe, who had returned to normal from her fear-induced adrenal high. 10 minutes later the tow truck came and took the adder with it. Naruto followed it part of the way and broke off once the garage was in sight. She got out of her gauntlet and after patting the hood, she climbed into her Sand King. Tired, Naruto pulled up on the driveway, not bothering to park in the garage. She got into her bed and collapsed onto her back. Zoe quickly changed into her PJs and snuggled up to her. Naruto woke up with a groan. Zoe was curled in a ball next to her. She got up, carefully not to wake the sleeping blonde. She made herself a large bowl of her fruit, nut and honey yogurt. Sitting down on the couch, she turned on the TV and watched the news. On the bottom of the screen, headlines ran. Over that was the stocks for gold and currency. Currently they were showing a report of the troubles in Africa. Once the report was done, the news studio was shown. "Good morning, Los Santos and the rest of San Andreas," Jim Harrison said. "I'm Jim Harrison. And I'm Sheila Hall. This morning at 6. Stocks are strong. Other countries are still complaining about the Kingdom of Whirlpool. The weather is still beautiful and fame has driven another celebrity to madness. The stocks are still going strong. With the recent developments overseas, experts believe that a crash in the market may be imminent." "That's right, Jim. With the recent unrest in the Middle East and Europe, both investors and the experts agree that the markets may suffer from these ongoings. So far, the rates have been stable, but experts encourage caution." In other news, many of our allies are not content with the continued isolation of the Whirlpool Kingdom. Not content indeed, Sheila. Many countries are blaming the US for the continued solidarity of the kingdom. When asked by the media earlier this week, the commander-in-chief had this to say. The screen showed the president stand in front of a large group of reporters. "When it comes to our latest ally, the Kingdom of the Whirlpool, and the accusations of the United States, blockading attempts of further expanding their list of allies, I have this to say. Those accusations are simply not true. I have on multiple occasions encouraged the kingdom's leaders to further expand their political reach. Each time the reply was the same. We do not need more allies. Our nation has lived peacefully for centuries without them and will do so further in the future. Our allegiance with the United States of America is a curiosity. Many of our people have seen signs of other cultures and people. This allegiance is there for the cultural exchange, to sat our people's curiosity, not because of the need for allies. And in all honesty, I have to agree. The Kingdom of the Whirlpool has been prosperous away from contact, and will do so in the future. The United States will do all we can to further the exchange with them, but we will not push them into things they do not want nor need. Thank you, that is all." The screen went back to the studio. Strong words from the president. In other news, teen sensation, Poppy Mitchell, was filmed doing very intimate, as she states on her Bleeder account, yoga class. She and her partner then continued to chase the two photographers in her car and was soon stopped by the harsh reality of concrete in a construction yard. You can find the video on our website. They then sent the camera to the weather wall. Naruto chuckled. She had set up a bodyguard business. Many of the famous stars and wealthy businessmen and women now had an Uzumaki-trained bodyguard. Poppy Mitchell and her wannabe boy toy Justin Bingers had made a huge campaign on Life Invader and Bleeder against her and her home, calling her barbaric, unsophisticated and a warmonger. Why? Well, she had demonstrated Uzumaki warfare, relying on spears, shields and swords. When she was forced to answer questions about the wars in the Middle East, she stated the general Uzumaki stance towards any conflict. Either stay out of it completely or go on and eradicate one side completely with extreme prejudice. She was first called unsophisticated by a politician when she spoke directly, not caring if she offended someone. Uzumaki politics were battles with words, but just like battles with swords, the sharper blade won. All in all, many of the touchy-feely types didn't like her and she did not like them. Sighing again, she packed her bowl away and stretched. Changing into her swimsuit, she jumped into the pool and started to do laps. An hour later, Zoe woke up with a cup of tea. She set it down at the edge of the pool and walked inside to fetch her breakfast. Naruto got out of the pool and started on some taijutsu kata. The slow deliberate movements made her relax and made her feel more aware. Looking around, she spotted the glint of a camera lens. Sighing, she walked to a shed, unlocked it and took out her self-built heavy sniper rifle. She had customized it with the latest technologies as well as a state-of-the-art suppressor. She climbed to the wooden overhang and sat down. Sitting slightly angled towards the glint, she propped the rifle onto her left knee. Leaning forwards a bit and using her right leg to balance, she looked through the scope. Quickly finding her mark, she zoomed in and got a good look at the paparazzi. While paparazzi presence had dwindled significantly over the years, some were as stubborn as roaches. She looked at his features and recognized the man. Beverly Felton was the only son to two prominent benefactors for Leon's community project. Both of them were journalists for a widespread independent newspaper that was read nationwide. The two had done much to promote the project with their news coverage. She could shoot, bad publicity. Sighing, she got out her headset. She had designed it herself. A small screen was over her left eye. Her left ear was covered by a hard shell metal headphone. Connected to it was a microphone a few inches away from her mouth. On her head, a padded thin metal sheath went over her head and behind her neck. In her right ear was an earbud. It was powered by a military lithium battery. She dialed Beverly's number and waited for him to pick up. "Hello? Mr. Felton, is that a new camera? The last one you had a few weeks ago was smaller. Is that a telescopic lens? What's the range on that?" 300 feet. It looks nice. Air. What do you mean, Miss Uzumaki? The man said, sounding a little nervous. You see that tree next to you? She let a round go, punching a 2-inch wide hole through the trunk. Please refrain from taking pictures of me at my home without making an appointment. Have a wonderful day. She got up and put her rifle away. She sighed and walked back to her bed. Zoe was on the phone with her parents. Apparently, they were asking her to come over for lunch. Zoe replied, and even offered to take care of the food. Zoe grabbed the keys for her Dusta and drove off. Naruto soon got a text to bag a stag for lunch. Naruto grinned and jumped into her Sand King. A short drive later, she spotted a young buck on a field off the side of the road. She pulled over and lowered her passenger window. She took out her silenced sniper rifle from under the back bunk and put it together. Leaning against her door, she supported the rifle on her knees. Taking a deep breath, she aimed. Exhaling, she let the round go and watched the buck collapse. She walked over to the body and hoisted it over her shoulders. Getting a plastic tarp and unfolding it, she dropped the body into the bay. She got into the truck and drove to Vinewood Hills. Pulling up to the DeSanta residence, she walked into the backyard and started to clean the kill. Zoe had started to dig a pit. When Naruto arrived, she brought out an icebox for the meat. Once the pit was done, she drove off to get the firewood, in Naruto's truck. Once the fire was set up, she drove to a store and bought a few packs of wood. When she returned, she stacked the wood and helped Naruto marinate the meat. As they were putting the meat into a container, Stacy came into the kitchen. "What are you doing here, loser?" she said. "This is still as much my home as it is yours. I have a key. I am here because Mom invited us for lunch. Naru and I even brought food," Zoe said. "You know I can't eat that fatty garbage, you moron. Like, I don't even know how you can even eat that. You're disgusting and now get out of my house." "I would appreciate if you would leave her alone," Naruto intervened. "And you leave too, freak show. While I may appear strange to you, I at least know how to keep my relationship solid, anchored and more importantly, monogamous." "You, bitch!" Stacy screamed, launching herself at Naruto. Sighing, Naruto grabbed the fist, twisted it and planted the offending tween in a chair. Due to the momentum, the chair tipped over backwards and the girl hit the floor. "If you are smart, you will stay down. But then again, your past choices do not hint to that character trait," Naruto said coldly. "Let me tell you a little something. You are a spoiled little girl, who thinks that just because daddy has some money, and because you have some good looks, you think you can do anything you want with no regards to the consequences of your actions. Just remember, My family is wealthier than anyone in the state. I am the heir to those who run my homeland. In my world, if I acted like you, I would be treated as a prisoner. Forced labor, brutal disciplining, and not mention being cast out of the family and out of the kingdom. And as such treated as dirt. So, you better shape up, act according to your age, or you might find yourself in a situation that will have consequences. Needless to say, the girl ran crying to her room. Sighing, the two put the meat into the fridge, disposed of the ice and started the fire. After a few minutes, Miranda came outside. "Hey Zoe. How are you, honey?" the woman said, embracing her daughter. "Hey Mom. And you too, Naruto. It's good to see you too, Mrs. DeSanta. I'm sure you and Zoe have some talking to do. I'll make the meat. I assume that James and Stacy will also be joining, and Mr. DeSanta as well." "No, Stacy is very upset after she attacked you. Jimmy saw the whole thing. Jimmy's playing his damn game. And Michael, I have no idea where he is. But if you brought the meat already, I'll make it for dinner." "Wonderful. This is freshly shot venison. I shot it myself not 2 hours ago." Naruto left and retrieved the meat. After putting the strips on skewers, she kept an eye on them to keep them from burning. It took an hour to have all the meat done. Over the time, she had heard the garage open. Paying it no mind, she put the meat on a pair of plates and walked over to Amanda and Zoe. The two had been happily talking about life and school. She offered the two the venison and took a strip herself. After eating a small portion of the large amount of meat, handing the rest of it to Amanda, she explained an easy recipe for it. "The meat is done well, so you can put it in a freezer and then thaw it out in the fridge 4 hours before the prep. I suggest a stir-fry, with rice, eggs and vegetables. Zoe, if we still want to catch the sunset, we need to move." "Where are you heading?" Amanda asked. "We're going to do a mountain bike tour up to Mount Gilead and then dash down the mountain to Chumash to watch the sunset." "Well, then don't let me keep you." The two got into the truck and returned to their home. They changed into some track suits and jumped on their bikes and made their way up to the mountain. From there on out it was a beautiful downhill track all the way down to the beach. The two of them sat on the beach, enjoying the sunset. The next day was spent at the shooting range in Strawberry. Naruto had been shooting for 4 years, so her aim was on point. Zoe had started to fire guns after an adventurous paparazzi had decided to break and enter. Needless to say, Naruto was less than hesitant to put 2 rounds in each kneecap before choking him with her foot. After which she called LSPD, who brought him to hospital. Naruto was currently drinking some water when her cell phone rang. Naru. You up for a race? I have $200 saying that the Blue Fox of Los Santos will finally lose her 2-year winning spree. Meet me at the usual spot, 8 p.m. sharp. It's the standard circuit in the area. I'll be there. Can't let that orange abomination you call a car win now, can I? Naruto put the phone down and back in. Firing a few more magazines of sniper rounds at moving targets, she and Zoe packed up and drove to the garage. They still had a couple of hours until the race, so the two girls grabbed their overalls, popped the hood and started to tinker with the engine. As the time of the race drew closer, the two stepped out of the overalls and sighed. Naruto tossed her girlfriend a bottle of water and drank from her own. Once rehydrated, the two jumped into the Bravado Gauntlet and let it growl to life. Driving aggressively through the streets, Naruto quickly got a feel for the new reactions of her car. After a short while, she arrived at the start. She lined up in 5th and waited. A minute later a white Bravado Buffalo pulled up beside her. She instantly recognized the driver and growled. It was one of the men that were responsible for the extra bullets in her truck's front bumper. She was going to humiliate him. She revved her engine and as soon as go was signaled she blasted off. Sliding though the corners and around the traffic, Naruto loved this course. There were many tricky corners, and if you weren't careful, the straightaway would lead you to a fatal crash. Going into lap 2, Naruto was blasting past an LSPD squad car. The sirens lit up and followed. Flooring the accelerator, she widened the gap and slid through the corners. She was doing the best run she had ever done on the course. She was enjoying herself. Going into the last straightaway she got away and screeched to a halt behind the finish. After getting her money, She grabbed the fool and ripped him out of his buffalo. She held him up by his throat, staring at him. You owe me 1 grand. That stunt you two idiots pulled cost me, and I want my money back. I know your car. I know your registration, and I know your face. And if you idiots ever do something like that again, I will personally ship you out on the ocean and drown you. She dropped him onto the floor and punched the driver's side window. After that she left. She drove home and watched some TV. Over the years, she had really gotten into NASCAR. She had bought DVDs of last 30-odd seasons. She watched 1 or 2 races every other day and was catching up. She was watching the 2000 Daytona 500. She had always wanted to drive the Daytona International Speedway. She was sure, given the chance and a month to build her engine, she could race those cars. They were just starting the first lap, when her phone rang. Not recognizing the number, she answered in Japanese. Konnichiwa, Uzumaki Naruto. Watashi wa dare ni hanashite iru no desu ka. Hello, Uzumaki Naruto speaking. To whom am I speaking? She greeted the other side. Ahaya gozaimasu, Uzumaki-san. Kono ejento kaligan wa. Iaa no dairi to shite hanashite amasu. Rozu santosu no danton no hansha de watashitachi omi ni kuru koto ga dekamasu ka. Tien ni ti sweet ohanashi shite to omoamasu. Good evening, Miss Uzumaki. This Agent Callaghan, speaking on behalf of the IAA. Are you able to come to see us at our HQ in downtown Los Santos? We would like to talk to you about a proposal. Mochiran watashi wa kuru koto ga dekamasu. Watashi wa 1300 shapu ni soko ni amasu. Sateki na yuru o sugashite, Callaghan-san. Of course, I can come over. I will be there at 1300 sharp. Have a nice evening, Agent Callaghan. She put her phone down and shook her head. The IAA was an executive agency, operating all over the world. This could be interesting. Sighing in contentment, she leaned back and took a bite of her venison jerky. She resumed the race and enjoyed her evening.